So this post here was scrap metal that actually we just welded together, and whether it was necessary or not, I'm not completely sure, but it was. It did give us a little bit of comfort having this installed, and we have one in the front of the bus at the same location, and that location is where the brackets are installed. So what this, in theory, what this is accomplishing is keeping the upper part of the bus, which was free floating while we were doing the roof raise, was keeping it at an exact distance so that there was no movement at the location of the bracket, because that would be bad for our thread rod. We would start, instead of lifting straight up, we would potentially get off kilter, and then that could potentially spell disaster. So we installed these guys, and we'll be cutting those out momentarily. The other aspect of this was making sure that there wasn't excessive movement in the upper part of the bus when we lifted the roof. So what we did to counteract that was use these small sections of angle iron. It didn't need a lot. I actually over welded. You can see, welded the entire section down here, and in reality what I should have done to make it easier on us for this stage is weld a little section here and a little section here, but I was just worried about it, so we overdid it, and we'll have to cut all that off now. But what this angle iron did for us was give a guide for the top to slide up and down along. So obviously this post only has one on the interior of the bus, which is going to prevent motion in this direction. So we have more than one post, and every post got its own angle iron. So we had this one on the interior of the bus. We have this one on the exterior, and instead of only being on the interior, it's actually preventing motion in this direction and out, because we're utilizing the corner. Because we installed the window frames, we couldn't simply put channel all the way around. And then behind us there's another piece of channel, and this piece of channel prevented motion obviously in this direction towards us and that direction, so it kept it from moving out or forward. And using several of these pieces of channel, we were able to ensure that we weren't going to have a catastrophe on our hands. So the angle was on this side, it was placed on the post on the opposite side of the bus, and gave us a little bit more reassurance that we weren't going to have a roof coming down on our heads. Remember, the goal was to raise the roof and not lower it. So the other aspect of this, which we kind of skipped over in the front because it's more exciting to talk about the actual raise itself, is the preparation. But of course, like anything, there was preparation that had to be done. One of the things that we discussed and decided to do was install the window frames prior to raising the roof. Whether a good decision or bad decision, I can't say because I've only ever done it this way. But what I will say is the roof raise went very smooth, so whether you do it before or after, I'm sure it wouldn't make a difference. I've seen a lot of people do roof raises and they do it without installing the window frames first. So what this did for us was really tied in the sections, so the post had little room to move around. This really, instead of having this long section here, we ended up with a complete block by tying in kind of the top and the bottom of the post where we were cutting. And if you could imagine, we made all of our cuts down here. So essentially we have this small section which went from here to here, or I guess it was this small section and this small section were once joined, and we had to make all of those cuts all the way around the bus. And as we made the cuts, we would install the angle iron. So And it's important to note, you have to make the cut first, then install the angle iron. Otherwise you run the risk of cutting angle iron. The same went for the posts that we made, the brackets. We had to install these first because I didn't want to go around cutting posts and installing the angle without having our support in place first. So obviously you cut the 4 posts in the corner, install the brackets, everything's good there. Then you start going around and cutting the posts and installing the angle as you go. So we got all that in place, so that was great. Then what we needed to do was cut the front and back cap off because there's posts up there. That was a little bit of an interesting process because I didn't have a big enough cutoff wheel, 4.5 inch, and the circular saw couldn't quite reach everywhere. So we only had the 2 posts here that had to be cut, but then these sections along the side all had to be cut too. And that's where it was a little bit challenging, but obviously we did manage to get everything cut. We did cut part of the front cap, which is fine. We'll just have metal that takes the place along the side, and metal will be filled in the front, sheet metal. So we'll eventually get to that stage, but we managed to get this front cap, and it was a little more difficult than the rear because in the rear we actually had a little huddle and decided not to cut the rear cap, which was a really good decision on our part, I think, because it means that we're not going to be spending whatever $600-700 on a new fiberglass cap in the back. And so each of these posts weren't attached to the fiberglass cap itself, so it was easy enough to cut those. This one I did have to actually make a cut through the fiberglass, but Lauren will be able to patch that up later. And so that was the one troublesome post. The cap itself, you can see all the holes in the bottom. So there were a few added things that had to be done for preparation. All those holes represent rivets that once were and obviously no longer are. And the 3 holes here and the 3 holes here represent where the hinge was installed for the blower motor door. So the door that's above the engine compartment, those hinges and the whole door actually had to come off. You can see on the sides there's also holes where rivets once were, and so those rivets all had to be drilled out. And as you can see, the easy explanation is the whole rear cap, the perimeter of the rear cap had to be removed so that it was free floating, so as we raised the roof the cap was free to move up and down. And we accomplished that, which was really, I was really excited about. So that's more or less the preparation. That's how we affected the raise, so got the raise to actually occur, and how we are supporting the raise now.